serious situation, I'd snorted and patted her on the head. "You worry too much. I'm just sleeping at the Cullens. I'm not mutilating my flesh with razor blades or anything." It seemed to have calmed her worries enough for the immediate time being, so she smiled and walked with me to class, being very careful not to mention the forbidden subjects of Edward or Esme. I knew she wanted to help in some way, but truthfully, there was nothing she could do but give me space. I think she realized this after so many days of asking me the same questions. When I'd get home with Emmett, we would enter the Cullen house, and I would ascend the stairs to the 3rd floor. He never made any attempt at stopping me or keeping me company. Poor guy was probably more nervous in my presence than I was in his. I never wore Edward's leather jacket, but I would occasionally lean down to where it lay over the sofa and breathe it, and it just didn't feel right to wear it. It felt like admitting it was a keepsake, and not something he planned to return home to. I'd spend my time doing various things, mostly going through Edward's belongings rather shamelessly. I reasoned that I was his girlfriend, and I felt entitled knowing that I'd allow him the same privilege if I could. Sometimes Rose would come home with Emmett, and keep me company while I did homework on his bed. Edward had left his iPod, and I listened to his music while doing homework, and even used his textbooks instead of my own. They had various assignment papers smashed carelessly between the pages, frayed edges of notebook paper hanging out in every which way, and for some reason, this made me smile. Half-completed essays and worksheets, with Edward's handwriting gracing them, would greet me with every turning page, and it felt like a surprise every time. I plundered his dresser drawers in the evenings and dressed in his clothes. When I wore his white t-shirts and dark boxers, I felt like his. It was a little ridiculous, and I could imagine the look on his face when he'd find out. I decided to imagine him amused rather than angered by it. His bedside table was most intriguing and infuriating. In the bottom drawer, which was clearly his very private hormonal teenager drawer, I'd made various appalling discoveries. I'd always known that I'd find something less than seemly while pillaging a teenage boy's bedroom. I'd been cautious, and remained certain that whatever I'd find wouldn't bother me, but the pornographic magazine that was hidden deeply in the drawer threatened to damage that resolve. I'd grimaced at the photos of breasts and disgusting poses, before angrily tossing it aside and continuing my quest. The notes from girls were the worst. I'd always known that Edward was attractive, and sought after by most females our age, but the things they wrote to him were startling. He must have gotten hundreds of notes over the years, but only these he kept, the dirty, profane, and debauched notes describing various fantasies featuring them. It took me all of 1 second to imagine why he kept these, before I irately rose and crumpled them in my fists. I'd ignored the thick layer of dust lining the drawer's handle, that clearly signified disuse, and had gathered the offending items. I'd discarded them in the wastebasket, with a grin. Unfortunately, it had fueled my curiosity, and jealousy, and the closet door had begun taunting me with the hidden treasures that resided within. The one place I couldn't venture. I'd nearly asked Rose to empty it for me on one of her common visits, but was afraid of her invading his privacy. It didn't even feel right when I did it, and though my guilt was short-lived when I considered his lack of communication and sudden departure, the snooping eventually lost its luster. I never knew what time Carlisle had come home, because I was always in Edward's room doing these things. Late in the night when my stomach would rumble, I'd sneak downstairs and into the kitchen. I'd make myself something small and easy, all the while promising silently to repay Carlisle before returning to the room. I'd spend the night going through sketchbooks and reading until the sun rose, unless I was particularly tired. In these cases, I'd sleep with the light on. I'd shower in his bathroom every morning before meeting Emmett downstairs to depart for school. I'd pass Carlisle in the hall, and he'd wordlessly offer me a sad grin as he prepared to leave for the hospital. He never mentioned me, and though he still appeared rather dismal, I'd wondered how close they still were, and if Esme were offering him any comfort in Edward's absence. I'd silently hope. and so the school day would commence, and I'd repeat the routine without faltering. It was predictable and boring, and even though I had a large group of friends on the ready to support me, it was lonely. My eyes knew the calendar page of May like the palm of my hand. I never needed to ask anyone for a reminder of what day of the week it was. My mind had become perfectly in tune with the little black columns of numbers and blank squares. Every day felt like one piece of my obliterated rocket ship had been returned to my shattered fuselage. God, I'd become such a drama queen. By the time the countdown had reached 3 days, my whole body had begun humming with anticipation. I paced the golden carpet of the bedroom and battled to find things to keep my mind engaged at nights. Even if I'd felt the need to surrender to sleep, it simply wouldn't have been possible. I was jittery during the day at school, nearly vibrating with my eagerness for the final dismissal. I jogged to classes, as if the action would make the school day pass faster. Alessandros would struggle to keep up with me and occasionally failed to do so. The time was drawing nearer, and as the last morning of school approached, I found myself perched on the Collins Bay window, staring anxiously at the driveway, and waiting for the silver Volvo to suddenly materialize. Carlisle passed me on his way out the door to work, and even though I doubted he'd admit it, I could see him humming with the same anticipation as he smiled and exited the house. Emmett finally descended the stairs, snapping his hand over his shoulder as he reached the door.
Come on, sexy lady. Last day of high school for yours truly. Don't wanna be late or anything.
He grinned, his dimples appearing endearingly. I smiled back and followed after him, trying to ignore the dual sensations of giddiness and anxiety. The school day buzzed with excitement, and every student seemed to vibrate with the enthusiasm the summer brought. We had no assignments, no homework, and spent most of the day cleaning our lockers. By the time the last bell rang, I was a nervous wreck. Rosalie met me at my desk and led me to the parking lot, speaking amicably about her and Emmett's plans for the summer and college. They were both excited since Carlisle had sprung for off-campus housing. Alice and Jasper were all smiles, and everyone seemed to be in such high spirits. I couldn't tell if it was the end of the school year, Edward's imminent return, or maybe even both, but for once I allowed myself to laugh and smile with them as Emmett drove us home. I was so anxious as we approached the street that I held my breath. I was expecting to see the car in the driveway, even though I had already given Edward a good 4-day grace period. I didn't know what kind of driving conditions he was encountering. Still, when we pulled into the driveway and found it vacant, my stomach sank in disappointment. Emmett knew this well, and shot me a cursory grin of reassurance in the rearview mirror. We were just entering the house when Elisa's shrill voice alerted me to her presence in the yard next door. She was jogging to us from the road with something in her hand, and when she finally approached me, her eyes were cautious. She extended her hand and the envelope it held to me, and with some apprehension, I extracted it. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. I sunk to the ground and hastily tore it open, trying to ignore the eyes on me, and Elisa's hushed whisper to Emmett, "It's from Edward." I frantically tore it open, terrified that something was wrong, that something had happened to him. When I tore out the letter and unfolded it, it took me all of 3 seconds to read. "Bella, I love you. I miss you. I need more time. I'm sorry. E.